Good morning. I see people are still coming in, finding their seats. I'll give you another half a minute. But I can guarantee you that when we get to the end, they're not going to give me extra time. They run this program like clockwork. Baruch Hashem. It's one of the most professional events I've ever seen in my life. Okay, we're ready? Ready? Rolling? What's the red light mean? Stop? No? Okay. Let's go. Okay. There was a Hasidic dynasty from a town in Ukraine, Husyatyn. And in between the wars, this particular Hasidic court moved to the Central European cosmopolitan city of Vienna, Austria. And the Rebbe of Husyatyn, Hasidic Rebbe, lived there, and it was not exactly a bastion of traditional Judaism at the time. It was considered a very modern city. And a reporter saw this Hasidic Rebbe walking down the street, and he asked somebody, "Who is that?" They told him, "That's the Rebbe of Husyatyn. And he's not just a regular rabbi. He's a Wonder Rabbi. He's a Wonder Rabbi." So the reporter says, "I never met a Wonder Rabbi. I'd like to meet one. Could you arrange it?" The guy says, "Fine, no problem." The journalist meets the Rebbe of Husyatyn. He asks him, "I hear you're a Wonder Rabbi, a Wonder Rabbi. Could you explain to me what that means?" The Rebbe of Husyatyn says, "Well, I'll tell you like this. You have a rabbi of a community, a congregation, and he runs a whole shul. He's in charge of a whole shul. Then you have a rabbi, maybe you call it a shtot rav, city rabbi, and he controls a whole city. Then you have a chief rabbi of a country, he controls a whole country. Then you have a Wonder Rabbi, a Wonder Rabbi, and he controls himself." I travel a lot. It's part of my profession. There was a fellow, he had an obsession, you might call it, in ein Rednish, about getting the aisle seat whenever he would travel. In fact, he was so obsessed with it that whenever he would book a ticket, he wouldn't book it online. He would have to call up, pay the extra fee, and speak to an agent. And he would do it 6 months before the trip. And he would get his seat assignment, and he would have them explain to him to affirm, "Yes, sir, 38C is an aisle seat." 6 months before the trip. 3 months before he'd call again, he would confirm, "Yes, sir, 38C is an aisle seat." A month before he'd call again. 2 weeks before he'd call. The week of, he'd call each day. The day before the trip, he'd drive down to the airport, and he would talk to the ticketing agent. Then the day of, obviously, he got there hours and hours before his flight, and he would not allow them to print a boarding pass till they would look him in the eye and they would say, "Yes, sir, 38C is an aisle seat." So he takes his trip, he gets to his destination, his friend came to pick him up. And when his friend came to pick him up, he looked like what we say in Yiddish, he looked ois mensch, he looked beside himself. So his friend says to him, "What's wrong? You look upset." The fellow says, "I look upset? I look upset. 6 months ago I called, I confirmed 38C is the aisle seat. 3 months ago I called, 38C is the aisle seat. A month ago, 2 weeks ago, this week, every day, yesterday, came down to the airport. This morning, I got there hours early. I wouldn't let them print the boarding pass so they would look me in the eye. They would tell me 38C is the aisle seat." I got on the plane, and what do you think? I did not have the aisle seat. So his friend says, just trying to be helpful, "If it was so important to you, why didn't you ask the guy in the aisle seat to trade? He says, don't you think I thought of that? There was nobody sitting in the aisle seat. So I want to talk about our big problem today, ourselves, the one that we call the guy in the aisle seat. And I want to see if we can learn how to control ourselves. Because if I'm not the problem, I'm not the solution. Which is a wonderful realization. You know, when I grow up and I realize you're not the problem, or at least you're not my problem. I had a friend, he was a live-in counselor at a halfway house. It's a rough job. He did it for a year. That's about all a person can do. It's an intense job. You're dealing with guys who just came out of the rehab, and they're relearning everything, like babies, emotionally, just completely raw. And he was the live-in counselor at the halfway house. So he's dealing with these guys who are basically just learning day-to-day life from scratch. And so he had a stack of stickers. I don't know if he made them himself or he found them and he bought a bunch. But there were these stickers, a little white box like this big, and had red letters, red capital letters in bold. And what he would do is he would give these stickers to the guys when they would move in. And he would say, look, if you want, you can take this sticker, you put it on your mirror in your room. And when you get up in the morning, you wash your face, you brush your teeth, you see your reflection in the morning, you have this sticker right there when you see yourself first thing each day. And what did the sticker say? Just a little white box, red letters, capitals, that's it. Just one sentence. You put it on the mirror, and it said, you are now looking at the only problem you will have all day. Somebody once told me, I thought it was a little bit cruel, I didn't appreciate it, but he said, Shais, think to yourself, every failed relationship, every interaction that became dramatic, that went toxic, where there was hurt feelings, that just fell apart. If you could look back through your life, and identify a common thread, a common denominator in all of those failed interpersonal relationships, can you find one thing that was a constant? And I thought for a while. He interrupted me. He says, don't you know? You. I told you I didn't appreciate it very much. I said, he's right. It's always me. I'm always the constant. See, somebody once told me there's three things I cannot change. The past, the truth, and you. I can't change you. I can change me. It's the only person I can change. But I can't change you. And then he added, and this was particularly insightful and helpful for me, whenever I find myself distraught, if I will stop and be honest with myself and identify the source of my agitation, I will catch myself invariably in the midst of trying to change one of those three things. Either I'm in the middle of trying to change the past, or I'm trying to change the truth, or I'm trying to change you. And I will have no rest, I will have no serenity, I will not return to my true self until I can accept those things as they are and focus on the one thing I can change, which is me. So, in Torah, the way that we describe this paradigm is a simple phrase. The sages say in the Talmud. I'll tell it to you in Hebrew and then I'll translate because it's a one-sentence phrase. Hakol bidei shamayim chutz meyiras shamayim. Everything's in the hands of heaven except for one's awe of heaven. Two clauses there in that statement. First clause, everything's in the hands of heaven. That's a pretty categorical statement, pretty black and white, doesn't leave a lot of gray area. Everything's in the hands of heaven. God is running the show. Except for one's awe of heaven, my reaction, my attitude, my outlook. In other words, the way God is running reality, totally not my business. The way I choose to respond to that and the choices I make, totally my business. Only my business. Or somebody once told me, I do God's work, not his job. What's the Lord's work? Is acts of goodness and kindness, loving God's kids. God's job, running the universe. That's not my job, thank God. I heard from a guy who had 40 years sober. He was this gruff guy. Every sentence he said, he barked. And he said, there's 2 rules to stay sober. And there's the rules of spirituality. I said, what is it? He says, rule number 1, there's a God. Rule number 2, you're not him. Very simple. Rule number 1, there's a God. Rule number 2, you're not him. It's not just the audacity of playing God, the chutzpah. It's the tragedy of, if I'm busy being God, or a poor imitation thereof, who's busy being me? Who's showing up for my life? You know the story of Reb Zushya, the great Hasidic master, when he was on his deathbed, he was crying. His students were gathered around. They said, Rebbe, why are you crying? He says, I fear judgment. They said, Rebbe, you lived a life of perfect purity and piety. What in the world could you fear? He says, you don't understand. I'm not afraid that I'm going to get up there to the heavenly court. They're going to review my life and say to me, Zushya, why weren't you like Abraham, our father? Zushya, why weren't you like Moses, our teacher? I'm afraid they're going to look at me, look at my life, and they're going to say, Zushya, why weren't you like Zushya? So in other words, each one of us is a soul who was put in a body, born at this place, this time, to this man and this woman, to live this amount of years, months, days, hours, minutes, seconds. And there's a mission. It's a unique mission to you, and only you can do it. And the shame is some of us don't show up for our own lives. So that's what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about let God be God, and let's be ourselves. And that means stop focusing on the things that are in God's domain and start focusing on the things that we have power to change. In other words, in our powerlessness comes our power. When we admit our powerlessness, that we're not God, then we become our true selves. We get our freedom of choice. We get to show up for our own lives. I'm the son of a psychologist. My father's a psychologist, may he be well. I rebelled, I became a rabbi. I mean, it's not a joke, it's true, but I remember one time I was about 14 years old, I was sitting at the kitchen table, and my father, the psychologist, says to me, he says, son, what's the difference between psychosis and neurosis? And growing up in my home, of course, I understood that that was the setup for a joke. So I responded in the proper formula. I said, I don't know. What's the difference between psychosis and neurosis? So my father, the psychologist, tells me, psychosis is when I think 2 + 2 = 5. Neurosis is I know 2 + 2 = 4 and I can't stand it. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about I can't change the past, I can't change the truth, I can't change you. We're talking about everything's in the hands of heaven except for one's awe of heaven. We're talking about 2 + 2 = 4. Get used to it. Don't waste your energy. Why are we exuding energy in the one direction where we're not going to see any productive benefit? And the one area where we will see massive change, if we'll just do a little bit of work, that we don't want to change at all. Our awe of heaven, that's where we have power. We can change our attitude. And I think it's interesting when the sages say everything's in the hands of heaven except for one's awe of heaven. And what they mean is our attitude about the job that God is doing running the world. But there's a lot of words they could use to describe our attitude. And they use the emotion of awe. I think it's interesting to use the word awe. Awe is sort of on that spectrum of fear, awe, respect, overwhelm, anxiety. There's healthy awe and there's unhealthy awe. But basically what it's saying is like this. There's really one choice I get to make. Do I live in awe of God alone? Or do I choose to be ruled by the fear of people, places, and things? it's what we call debt consolidation. You roll all the payments into one easy monthly payment. See, once I realized that God is running the show, only God, all of a sudden, I'm not so afraid of the little idols that I make, the little idols that I make out of people, places, things, institutions, that I have to curry their favor because they can help me and they can hurt me. I realize, you know what? I don't have to live in fear of these things. I have to be in awe of God alone. And where my power comes in is when I accept the fact that God is running the world and he's doing a perfect job at it. And all I have to do is show up, keep my eyes open, and try to do the next right thing. But you see, the thing is, we are so, I'm saying we, human beings, are very, by default, we're very weak. We don't like discomfort. That's the animal side of us. We get that adrenaline rush. We get that fight or flight, that panic reaction to reality. We don't like it. Reality makes us uncomfortable sometimes. So what we do is you all know the phenomenon of sitting across from somebody and they're sitting there but they're not present. And especially nowadays, I don't even have a smartphone, but by choice. But nowadays, if somebody is not enjoying their present company, they will just go into this piece of plastic and that's it. It's like, I'm sitting here, but I'm not here. Oh, you thought we were having a conversation? But you understand, we do this all the time. Now, some of us do it chemically. We numb ourselves from reality chemically. Some of us do it through compulsive behaviors. But you know the biggest way of disconnecting ourselves from the present reality, from the here and now? Through toxic emotions. That's why, I think the subtitle of the talk here is emotional sobriety. Because really all sobriety is emotional sobriety. When you work with addicts, chemical sobriety is very easy. Because how do you achieve chemical sobriety? Detox. It's very simple. It's not fun, but detox. And it takes however many days, depending on the chemical you're drying out from. And then that's it. And then you're home free, you would think. But you see that even when there's no chemical lingering in the body, there's still this propensity to come back to the dysfunctional behavioral patterns and thought patterns. So that's not about chemical sobriety, that's about emotional sobriety. And that's what we're all battling with. We're all somehow hooked on toxic emotions that we use to buffer out reality. We use it to not be present when we don't like the way God is running reality. One of the big examples is anger. The sages say, Kol hakoyes ki'ilu eved aveda zara. Anyone who gets angry, it's like he worships idols. I don't like to say that. It makes people angry. But why do the sages say that? Are they just trying to be hyperbolic? They just want to tell you, anger is really bad. Well, how bad could it really? Idolatry bad. It's not an exaggeration. It's literal. What is anger? Anger is a reality rejection. Anger is the statement, God got it wrong. The present reality is incorrect. And it's the indignance that God is not doing his job properly. It's the inability to accept and function within the reality as God is creating it at this moment. So that's why it's idolatry, because when you reject reality, you reject the author of reality. There was once a rabbi. He spent months raising money to pave a parking lot by the shul. And after they finally came and they put down the fresh cement, these little boys came out from Hebrew school and they were playing tag and they ran through the wet cement and they tracked it all up. And the rabbi, he'd spent months raising the money and overseeing the project, he lost it and he started screaming at the boys. And at that precise moment, one of the boys' fathers came for carpool to pick up the kids. And the father was shocked. He says, Rabbi, didn't you tell us anyone who gets angry, it's like he worshipped idols? The rabbi says, yes, But that was in the abstract. This is in the concrete. I cannot tell you how relieved I am that pun works in South Africa. I wasn't sure. Probably could have checked it out first, but living in the moment here. Okay. Another reality rejection, another drug, is fear. What's fear but checking out of the present in order to put ourselves in an imagined future? Anxiety, worry, fear is about, I'm not here because I'm there in a future that hasn't happened yet and may never happen. Or resentment. What's resentment? Resentment is I'm living in my recollection of the past. That's what a resentment is, a resentiment, from the Latin root sentir, which means to feel. So resentment is a resentiment. It's not happening now, but I'm feeling it now. And you know what? My body doesn't know the difference. I'm driving in my car. There's no threat. There's no bear jumping. Well, I'll make it South African. There's no lion jumping at me. Right? The adrenaline response is a survival mechanism. God gave it to us so that, to keep us safe. So it's healthy. Fight or flight is healthy. If there's something to fight, there's something to flee from. But our brains are such massively powerful machines. You know what we do to ourselves? Somebody hurt me 20 years ago. I'm in my car, 20 years removed, maybe thousands of miles removed, and all of a sudden I realize I'm in that stream of consciousness and I'm doing that resentment meditation. Okay, I didn't even know I was doing it. And my stomach goes cold and my palms get sweaty and adrenaline is pumping. I'm having a visceral reaction to something. It's not taking place anywhere in the phenomenological universe. It's a reaction to what's going on in my own head. I'm a good meditator. Do you realize that, by the way? If you know how to worry, you know how to meditate. If you know how to have a resentment, you know how to meditate. Because worrying is an imagined future that you're emotionally reacting to. And resentment is your recollection of a past that you're emotionally reacting to. So you see the power of our minds. Emotional sobriety is the ability to not retreat into fear, resentment, or anger, and rather to feel whatever it is from the stimuli of the moment, whether it be pain or pleasure, and not to be selective about which realities from God I'm willing to show up for. I'm not going to tell God I'm unwilling to show up for a moment of my own life. They shouldn't say, Zusha, why weren't you Zusha? When I was a young rabbi, and I know sometimes I say that, people say, you are a young rabbi. First of all, I'm not so young. I had a birthday last week. I'm 41. That's not so young. Thank you. I have a little white in my beard. When I was in my 20s and a little bit, inexperienced. So I was invited to speak to a group called Gilda's Club, and it's named after Gilda Radner, Aleha Shalom, who was a very talented young Jewish woman who died of ovarian cancer. And her husband, also a Jew, Gene Wilder. By the way, just as an aside, I travel around, I speak, that's basically what I do for a living, and I won't say where it was, but it was Florida. And I figure it's safe. This doesn't go on YouTube, right? Okay. So I mentioned Gilda's Club and Gene Wilder, and somebody screaming from the back row of a very large hall like this. And I didn't know what he was screaming at. So finally, I was so distracted. I said, sir, what are you saying? So finally, everybody in the audience was repeating it for me. So Willy Wonka, I said, yes, sir. I said, Gene Wilder, you have to say Willy Wonka. Okay. So I said to him, I was speaking in a Chabad house, and it was a shul. So I said, sir, excuse me, a little decorum. We're in a shul. It's not Willy Wonka, it's the Frisco Kid, okay? So Gene Wilder made this thing for Gilda Radner, which is Gilda's Club. It's a place people who have cancer, and they go there for support and programs. It's a very wonderful program. And they invited me to speak on the topic of faith in the face of adversity. And I was like 25 years old, and I said, sure, I'll do it. Okay. So I'm pulling up, and it occurs to me, I'm going to talk about faith in the face of adversity to the people who've been diagnosed with a fatal illness. It's probably not a good idea. So as I'm pulling up in front of the building, the lady who ran the place, the director, she's like the type A personality. You know, she's standing there with the clipboard 10 minutes early. And as I'm pulling up, she literally like walks in front of my car, so I had to stop. And she opens the door. That's it. I can't bail out now. Rabbi, let's go. They're waiting. So we're walking down the steps. The social hall was in a basement. So we're walking down the steps, and I think to myself, you know what? These people have every right to tell me I'm an idiot. And if they do so, I'm making up my mind right now. I'm going to apologize, and I'm going to leave the mic. I'm just going to walk down off from the podium. That was the decision I made as I was walking into that room. If they tell me that I'm an idiot, I'm going to apologize. I'm going to walk away from the mic, and that's it. By the way, just to clarify, I did not make that condition with myself today before walking into this room. So you can say anything you want. I'm using my full 45 minutes. But then it occurred to me, this is something that I forget very often. You're going to laugh, but people look at me and tend to associate me with Judaism. No, you have to understand, I don't think of that. I'm just a regular guy. I'm just me. But people look at me and they associate me with this whole thing, this 3,000 years of divine tradition. And the problem is, if they think I'm an idiot, I'm okay with that. But if that then, God forbid, will cast aspersions upon that which I represent to them, that cannot be. We're walking through the double doors. Double doors are swinging open, and I'm thinking to myself, how in the world am I going to deal with this? So right then and there, I just made a plan. I said, I'm going to make something up. If they like it, good. But if they don't like it, here's what I'll say. You want to know something? Of course that was foolish. I just totally made it up. Oh, you think that's in the Torah? No, nothing at all like that. And the Torah is really wise. Find somebody who knows how to teach it. So I get up there, and I started winging it, and I said, I was thinking the other day. Well, that part was true, because I had been thinking the day prior to the event. I said, I was thinking the other day about French New Wave cinema. And the French New Wave directors, they were very into like the auteur theory, the author theory, singular artistic vision, director, writer, producer. And that's what they were really into, you know, the film criticism, analyzing films. So they were sitting around, and Francois Truffaut was asked, who's the greatest director of all time? No, he did not say Francois Truffaut. He said Alfred Hitchcock. So they said, Francois, that's great. Why? So he says, why? Why Hitchcock? Very simple. What puts Hitchcock above and beyond all the rest? In his entire career, dozens of films, hours and hours and hours of footage, and there's not one single superfluous shot. Hitchcock's the best. So I'm talking to Gilda's Club, and I say, can I make as much of an argument on behalf of God as Francois Truffaut made on behalf of Alfred Hitchcock? Could I say that God has managed to show me a story to me about me without one single superfluous shot? Can I say that anything that he's put on the screen, any detail, no matter how seemingly insignificant, any encounter, no matter how seemingly fleeting, it's orchestrated, it's purposeful, it's by design. No filler, no accidents, Not a single superfluous shot. And I said, in fact, I think I could say even more than Truffaut can say for Hitchcock, because just logically speaking, I mean, God, he has an unlimited budget, no studio executives breathing down his neck, cast of billions, an unbelievable art department. Have you seen some of the scenery? It's incredibly lifelike. Yes, God could do it. He could make the perfect movie. And perfect doesn't mean perfectly pleasant, does it? But that's the nature of a narrative, right? Narrative has conflict. That's a good story. I was once at a Shiva house, and somebody says, ugh. A lot of sentences in Shiva houses, by the way, begin with the word ugh. So this lady says, ugh, he had a terrible life. I said, why would you say such a thing? So she said, he had loss, he had pain, he had adversity. I said, that's not a terrible life. A terrible life is he had every resource and every opportunity. He sat on the couch, he loved no one, he helped no one, he accomplished nothing. That's a terrible life. Just to say someone went through pain and had loss and adversity, it's not a terrible life. Why are you calling it a terrible life? Imagine if we would apply to a narrative the criteria we use when a good life. Would we call a story like that, what we call a good life, would we call that a good story? Imagine you're reading a novel. No conflict, no character development, no suspense, smooth sailing. Protagonist woke up at 7 a.m. this morning, exactly at the time he had set his alarm. He got in the car, although it was winter. You guys don't know from winter, okay? Real winter, like in New York. 20 below, Fahrenheit. He went to the car, he started his car, first turn of the key, motor was running. He started driving to work, he made every green light. There was no congestion, no bad traffic, he was 20 minutes early. He got to his office, he walked in, stepped up to his desk. There was no extra work waiting for him that his boss had just put there. He went through his regular routine. At 11:15 a.m., he decided to break 45 minutes early for lunch. He had a tuna fish sandwich on rye. It was very good. Come on, when does the action start to heat up here? This is not a story. I never heard anybody say, that movie was terrible. Do you know what that good guy went through? It was awful. At one point, we thought he would never get out of it. We just left. So I'm at Gilda's Club, and I'm talking about film theory, French New Wave, and I'd been cognizant of it through the corner of my eye for the whole time. I don't know, some people have a presence. You know, some people have a presence. You sort of like have to notice them, not because they're asking for attention, but just because they have a presence. There was a woman in the room who had a presence. And when she stood up very quickly, this is all happening in a quarter of a second. My eyes shifted, and I see. And the first thing I became aware of is I was very concerned that she was moving very quickly, and her body looked very, very frail. She was clearly in advanced stages of, fighting this disease. And she just shot up like that. And then within the same quarter of a second, I hear her voice comes out. She says, "Rabbi!" Like that, booming, just. It was incongruous to me, a very frail-looking person. She shoots up, her voice thunders. I said, "Yeah." She says, "I have to say something." I said, "Okay, that's fine." And I'm ready. I'm ready to be told that I don't know what I'm talking about, and that's fine. And she says, "My friends think I'm crazy when I tell them I don't wish that I never got cancer." And it's very frustrating because they either think it's a semantic thing, like, "Oh, you've given up?" No, God forbid. I'm fighting this thing, and I'm praying to live many happy, healthy years. "Oh, so you wish you never got?" No, I don't wish I never got it. And they get confused, and we go in circles. Or they think that I'm just being contrary, or they think that I'm kind of lost it a little bit. And it's very frustrating. I don't know, because it's important to me, this idea. And I don't know how to express the concept to them that I'm fighting it, and I'm looking forward, and I'm hopeful, and at the same time, No, I don't wish in any way that I never got it. And I don't know how to explain it to them. Because to them it's very simple. If you never got it, then you don't have to fight it. And now I understand how to explain it. Very simple how to explain it. I don't wish I never got it for only one reason. Because I did. And now, to wish that I had never gotten it would be to wish to have some story other than my own. She says, I don't want some other story. I don't want some other life. I want to see my story, my life, the story that God is telling me. I was blown away. And that was the day I realized, there's two concepts that are often confused for one another, unfortunately. And that's fantasy and faith. But if you understand the definition of either one of them, you understand that not only can they not be confused for one another, but they are exact opposites. But you have to know the definition of each. What's fantasy? What's faith? Fantasy is an idea that I cling to in order to avoid facing reality. Faith is an idea that I cling to in order to have the courage to face reality. So close, but yet so far. Opposites. Almost the same, but opposites. I'll say it again. Fantasy is an idea that I cling to in order to avoid facing reality. Faith is an idea that I cling to in order to have the courage to face it. So if you're going through life and you're not filled with worry and anxiety and dread and resentment, and you wonder, is this responsible of me? Aren't my kishkes supposed to be in a knot if I'm a responsible adult? Aren't they supposed to be manipulating, controlling other people? Because I know where they're supposed to be standing and they're not on their mark. You know what it's called, by the way. There's a clinical diagnostic term for somebody who's concerned with controlling others, and especially the ones they love the most. Jewish mother. No, it's called a codependent, but there was an epiphany that I had when I realized that a Jewish mother and a codependent are the same diagnosis. And that at that moment, I doubled my comedic repertoire because I had codependent jokes and I had Jewish mother jokes. I could use them interchangeably. How many Jewish mothers does it take to change a light bulb? Don't worry about me, I'll sit in the dark. That's a codependent joke as well. Or what's the last thing that a codependent sees before he dies? Somebody else's life flashes before his eyes. That's a Jewish mother joke as well. Okay. So, if you're going through life and you're not worried and anxious and afraid, and you say, whoa, is this responsible? So it's a very simple question. Is it reckless or is it courageous? I don't know. Are your eyes open or are your eyes closed? If it's reality affirming, it's courage. If it's reality denying, okay. We're talking about being grown-ups, big boys, big girls, who show up for our own lives and can experience the full gamut of pain and pleasure within reality. And just like that narrative that's going to have ups and it's going to have downs, and God is not going to shield us from the ups and the downs in our story. I never promised you a rose garden, right? What does it mean? It means pain is unavoidable, suffering is optional. You know the difference between pain and suffering? Pain is a stimulus response. It's just, there's nothing neurotic about pain. It's neurological. In fact, Lubavitcher Rebbe used to always say, "As it tut weh, schreit men." If it hurts, you say, ow. There's nothing neurotic about pain. It hurts. Suffering is self-inflicted. See, suffering is this cerebral, philosophical interpretation, usually where you assign some sort of a script or a role, usually a victim role, to yourself based on the pain that you just felt. Okay, my explanation was too cerebral. Let me act it out. You get up at 3 in the morning, and you're walking across the plush shag carpet, and your children were playing Legos. Parents know what's coming, right? And it's 3 in the morning, you're taking these heavy, plodding steps. And just full force in the carpet, you come right on a Lego. You know that millisecond where you realize it's coming, right? And it just takes a while for your nervous system to catch up, and then that bolt of lightning just goes right up to your skull and then back down to your toe. Okay, so you step on it. You say, ow! That's pain. A second later, you bury your head in your hands and you say, why does stuff like this always happen to me? That's suffering. I think the name of the talk was, hello, my name is I'm a Human Being. I got like 30 seconds, so I might as well mention the title, right? What does it mean to be human? It's a word that the English language got right. What's a human is an Adam, an Adam. Adam is from the word Adama, like Borei Pri Adama. Adama means earth because the man comes from the earth. Human means to come from the humus. You know what humus is? It's fertilizer, it's vegetable rot, it's dirt. Same etymology. In fact, I had a neighbor who was a wise aleck, and he said, you see our neighbor? He has a 20-pound bag of hummus. And I looked on our neighbor's lawn, and I saw 20 pounds, H-U-M-U-S. I thought, where are they going to get a pita large enough for this 20-pound bag of hummus? I'm telling you, he had me fooled for days before I realized, humus, that's an English word. Yeah, okay. So when you're human, you embrace that you are humus. You're just dirt. No offense. And when you're okay with that, that's called humility. And then you have a sense of humor. You can laugh at yourself, at your imperfections, your frailties. It's okay. There is a God. You're not him. Show up for your own life. Take it as it comes. You're not running the world. And it's this beautiful thing where, we learn how to, when we have a sense of humor, because we embrace our humanity and we have the humility, because we know we're from humus, we get over ourselves. When somebody's taking themselves too darn seriously, you tell them, get over yourself. But I love the idiom, because you know what that means, get over yourself? Literally, get over self. Transcend ego. And you know the ego is an acronym, E-G-O, edging God out. Get over yourself, not out of yourself. See, getting out of yourself is self-stimulation, is distraction. Like with chemicals, like with compulsive behaviors, like with anger and fear and resentment. That's getting out of yourself. Distraction. I remember when I was a kid, they were interviewing, it was Barbara Walters interviewing Woody Allen. Two Jews talking, and invariably they had to talk about God, whether they liked it or not. And Barbara Walters asked Woody Allen, this has got to be 20, 30 years ago, and Barbara Walters asked Woody Allen, she says, Woody, do you believe in God? And Woody thinks very seriously, and he thinks, I believe in distraction. And the person I was watching with said, do you see what an atheist Woody Allen is? He just called God a distraction. I said, you didn't see what I saw. Woody just called distraction his God. Because we make that decision. Will we be in a dynamic relationship with God, the author of reality, to show up for the moments of our lives as an intimate relationship with the author? Or will we have a relationship with distraction, with numbing, buffering? It's our choice. We have to get over ourselves, rise above the ego. Be human. Be humble. Just want to mention, by the way, the difference between two words in English which are very similar, humility and humiliation. They are similar words. They have similar conclusions. There's a God. I'm not him. I'm imperfect. I'm frail. I'm just me, little old me. But in experience, humility and humiliation are worlds apart. And I'll tell you the difference. Humility embraces its imperfection and powerlessness with grace and dignity. Humility. Humiliation faces its powerlessness, going down, kicking and screaming. Sooner or later we come to the conclusion, I can't be God, but I can be me. And that means to show up for every experience of my life. Not to control it, but to make the best choices that I can. So I want to leave you with a practical tool, because if I would speak for 46 minutes and not give you something that you can use, I would be remiss in my duty. So here's a practical tool you can all use at home. There's a prayer. It's not a Jewish prayer, but it's not from another religion. It's called the Serenity Prayer. And I find it useful as far as differentiating between, like we were talking about before, everything's in the hands of heaven except for one's awe of heaven, 2 + 2 = 4. And it goes like this. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, that's sort of like everything's in the hands of heaven. The courage to change the things I can, that means my awe of heaven, my ideas and outlook and attitude. And then the wisdom to know the difference is hopefully what we've been talking about at this session. So that prayer is very nice, but I found, practically speaking, that it's too long. Because if I'm getting reactive, I'm being a thermometer instead of a thermostat. You know the difference between a thermometer and a thermostat? Thermometer tells you what's the temperature in the room. Thermostat tells the room what's the temperature. So when I'm getting reactive to reality, right, and I'm getting either fear or the resentment or the anger, and I want to manipulate and I want to control, and I'm starting to think about what you need to be doing, right? And a lot of damage can happen, and that prayer is just too long. So what I did, I shortened the Serenity Prayer to make it more utilitarian, and I'm going to share it with you right here very quickly. It's the Kitzur, the abridged, abbreviated Serenity Prayer in Hebrew. I say it in Hebrew. I'll say it in Hebrew and then I'll translate it for you. And it goes like this. Okay, abbreviated Serenity Prayer in Hebrew by me. Okay, ready? Here it goes. Abbreviated Serenity Prayer in Hebrew. Should I translate? By the way, in Yiddish the word is a krechts. And I want to just point out that a krechts is very different than a kvetch. Because kvetching is not cute. If you're a parent, you know that. Kvetching is annoying, right? It's very annoying. It does not get results. When we were kids, by the way, I was just thinking about this the other day, in the 70s, they had station wagons with rear-facing seats. It was brilliant. When we'd start to kvetch in the car, my parents would just roll down that back window, and all the kvetching would sail down the highway away from them. Now, we have a 12-passenger van. All the kvetching is frontal. It just comes up to the front seat. Okay. Just like as a parent, you don't want to hear kvetching from your kids. God doesn't think your kvetching is cute. And I want to dispel an anti-Semitic myth right now. Kvetching is not Jewish. We didn't survive with pride and dignity 2,000 years of exile by kvetching, but we knew how to krechts. So let's do it together. On the count of 3, we'll do it together in unison, like communal prayer here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, hold on. I know I'm over time, but I'm sorry. I can't leave like this because there was a problem with our abbreviated Serenity Prayer. 10 more seconds here, because did you hear what happened? I was still inhaling while everybody else finished their krechts. And that's part of the krechts, because it's sort of, you bring it in, the pulling it in, the holding on to it is like part of that, like you want to control it, you want to hold on to it. And then when you let go of it, it's like that, let go and let God. Or the version I like better, let go or get dragged. So you have to have that the letting go is proportionate to the holding on. So you feel that reaction to stimuli, and you want to control it, you want to play God, you want to manipulate, and then you just, I'm not God, and that's good, that's fine, that's beautiful, he's taking care of me, no superfluous shots in my life. I just got to show up, I got to live every moment of my life, pain, pleasure, whatever. It just got to be me, not controlling it, just showing up. Okay, let's do it together. Count of 3. 1, 2, 3. And let us say, Amen.